The Magnets and Water Delusion, a medical forensic on Trump's brain rot breakdown. You know what keeps me up at night. What happens when the most powerful military on Earth gets its operational orders from someone whose neurons are firing like a shit-faced dumbass playing with a broken telegraph machine? Listen, I've spent enough time around stroke victims, dementia patients, and folks whose brains have turned into Swiss cheese from various neurological catastrophes to recognize the stench of cognitive decay when it wafts through my nostrils like rancid garbage baking in August heat. And what Donald Shitsniffer unleashed aboard the USS George Washington wasn't just your garden variety political bullshittery. It was a full-blown neurological car crash happening in real time, broadcast to the world like some perverse medical reality show where the patient is also somehow still holding the nuclear codes. Let me paint you a picture so vivid you can taste the fucking implications. A 79-year-old man, standing on one of the most sophisticated pieces of military engineering humanity has ever constructed, rambling about water defeating magnets like some demented wizard explaining his totally not insane conspiracy theory about how the elements wage war on each other. The electromagnetic aircraft launch systems, EMALS, which actually work, despite developmental hiccups that plague literally every complex military system, became the target of a verbal shit tornado that would make a dipshit physics undergraduate cringe so hard their asshole would pucker into a singularity. As Bertrand Russell once observed, the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubts. But what happens when the fool isn't just certain, when his brain is literally short-circuiting like a cockroach that crawled into a transformer? That's the question grinding against my skull like sandpaper on raw nerve endings. The neurological catastrophe unfolding before our eyes, the speech pattern. Trumpington to Shitty Gobhole exhibited isn't just old person talking. It's a specific constellation of cognitive fuckery that should send alarm bells screaming through every medical professional's consciousness. Let's break down the symptoms like we're conducting an autopsy on a still walking corpse. Perseveration and obsessive fixation. This motherfucker cannot let go of the magnets and water delusion. He's been dragging this particular piece of brain rot around since at least January 2024, repeating it like a scratched record, like a dipwad who heard one thing once, and his deteriorating hippocampus latched onto it with the death grip of someone drowning in their own cognitive decline. This isn't stubbornness. This is pathological. As Jean-Paul Sartre noted, we do not know what we want, and yet we are responsible for what we are. But what responsibility can we assign when the wanting mechanism itself has gone completely shitwreck? The repetitive nature of this delusion, the way it surfaces again and again like a turd that won't flush, suggests deep encoding despite its absolute wrongness. This is your brain on neurological failure, taking false information and cementing it into long-term memory while simultaneously losing the executive function necessary to reality test your own bullshit. Confabulation and false memory construction. That shit about China monopolizing magnets, about everyone being convinced to use magnets 20 years ago. This is confabulation, folks. It's when your brain, sensing holes in its own processing, just makes shit up to fill the gaps. Not lying, actual false memory construction. Your brain becomes a bullshit generator, a douchebag novelist writing terrible fiction to explain things it can no longer properly process or recall. The fucking irony that magnets have been used since 200 BC by the Chinese themselves, the very people he's scapegoating, would be hilarious if it weren't so goddamn terrifying. Michel de Montaigne wrote, "Nothing is so firmly believed as that which we least know." Donnie Turd Chomper has weaponized this principle, except his belief isn't philosophical, it's neurological. His brain literally cannot incorporate corrective information anymore. Loss of semantic knowledge and technical comprehension. Watch how he talks about hydraulics versus electromagnets. It's the verbal pattern of someone whose brain can no longer maintain complex technical relationships. He reduces everything to the simplest possible binary: steam good, magnets bad. Water beats magnets. His capacity for nuanced understanding has evaporated like piss on hot asphalt. This semantic aphasia, the inability to properly use and understand technical concepts, is a hallmark of vascular dementia and frontotemporal degeneration. The dumbfuck actually said, every tractor has hydraulic, every excavator, every excavating machine of any kind has hydraulic. Like he's a child who just learned a new word and needs to repeat it to feel smart. This is echolalia adjacent behavior, this repetitive use of phrases as though the repetition itself constitutes argument or evidence. Disjointed narrative construction and derailment. Track the logical flow, or rather, the complete absence of logical flow, in his statements. He jumps from magnets to elevators to tractors to China to executive orders like a fuckwit playing hopscotch across a minefield of his own misfiring synapses. This tangentiality, this inability to maintain coherent narrative threads, screams executive dysfunction. The prefrontal cortex, that beautiful piece of meat that makes us capable of planning and logical sequencing, is clearly compromised. John Dewey argued that we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. But what happens when the reflective capacity itself has turned to dog shit? When the machinery of thought has become a garbage disposal grinding up logic and spitting out word salad? The stroke hypothesis: why this matters beyond political theater. Now, let's get into the medical meat of this shit show, because what we might be witnessing isn't just aging or personality quirks. It could be post-stroke cognitive impairment, and the implications are as terrifying as a scumbag driving a school bus while actively having a seizure. Strokes don't always present as dramatic face drooping, arm weakness, speech slurring emergencies. Many strokes, particularly lacunar strokes and small vessel disease, accumulate silently, chewing through brain tissue like termites through a house's foundation. You don't notice until suddenly the whole structure collapses into a heap of cognitive debris. The vascular dementia connection. Farty Donaldo has multiple stroke risk factors stacked like a Jenga tower built by a butt face. Obesity, documented heart disease, reported elevated cholesterol, age, previous COVID infection, which increases stroke risk, a diet that would make a cardiologist weep, and stress levels that would kill a normal person. Vascular dementia often presents with exactly the symptom cluster we're seeing: impaired judgment, signing executive orders about catapults based on fundamental misunderstandings of physics; difficulty with complex tasks, understanding modern naval engineering; confusion, the entire water beats magnets worldview; perseveration, cannot stop talking about this one delusional belief; personality changes, though with this asshole, hard to distinguish from baseline. As Albert Camus wrote, the absurd is the essential concept and the first truth. Watching Cheatloaf's brain dissolve in real time gives that absurdism a particularly visceral flavor. We're living through the absurdity of a stroke victim commanding the world's most powerful military. The MRI irony you can taste like bile. Here's where it gets fucking delicious in the darkest possible way. This dick nozzle recently underwent MRI scanning, a technology that uses magnets so powerful they could pull the iron out of your fucking blood if they malfunctioned. Magnetic resonance, imaging. Magnetic. And yet, there he stands, ranting about how water destroys magnets, apparently completely unable to connect his own medical experience with his delusional technophobia. This cognitive disconnect, this inability to relate personal experience to claimed beliefs, is a massive red flag for brain injury. A functioning brain maintains these connections. A brain riddled with microstrokes or neurodegenerative disease? That brain becomes an archipelago of isolated information islands, unable to communicate with each other. each bit of knowledge trapped and alone like a cocksucker on a deserted island. Speech patterns and motor control. Reports indicate he repeatedly stumbled through sentences. This isn't just nervousness or public speaking challenges. This is potential dysarthria, the motor speech difficulty that comes from neurological damage affecting the muscles of speech or the neural pathways controlling them. Combined with the semantic and narrative issues, you're looking at a multi-domain cognitive impairment picture that should terrify anyone who gives a shit about, you know, nuclear warfare and military command decisions. Peter Singer reminds us, all the arguments to prove man's superiority cannot shatter this hard fact. In suffering, the animals are our equals. If we wouldn't let a stroke-impaired dog drive a car, why the fuck are we letting a potentially stroke-damaged human-control aircraft carriers? The dangerous delusion. Why the magnet obsession reveals catastrophic thinking. Let's dig into the specific delusion itself, because the content of the fixation matters as much as the fixation itself. This isn't just random nonsense. It reveals how Donald Cumswallower's brain is processing information about the modern world, and it's processing it like a shit-brained Victorian-era steam enthusiast trapped in a future he cannot comprehend. Technology fear and regression to the familiar. His obsession with returning to steam catapults and hydraulic elevators isn't about engineering efficiency, it's about psychological regression. His brain, struggling to process complexity, retreats to older, simpler technologies he can grasp. Steam makes sense to him. He can visualize it. Electromagnets, quantum mechanics, modern materials science. His neurons can't fucking handle it, so they reject it wholesale and retreat to the technological comfort food of bygone eras. This is what damaged brains do. They simplify, they regress, they return to earlier developmental stages or older frameworks because the processing power for new complexity no longer exists. It's like watching a computer with corrupted RAM trying to run modern software by reverting to DOS. Doreen Valiente wrote, "Magic is the art of changing consciousness at will." But what happens when consciousness changes involuntarily, when the hardware itself fails and the magic becomes malignant? When the will itself is compromised by dying brain cells? The paranoid dimension, China, and conspiratorial thinking. Notice how he weaves China into this magnet conspiracy, how they intelligently monopolized magnets and convinced everybody to use them. This paranoid framework, where foreign actors manipulate technology adoption for nefarious purposes, is classic conspiracy thinking that intensifies with cognitive decline. The brain, struggling to make sense of a complex world, imposes simplistic narratives of intentional malevolence rather than accepting the messy reality of technological evolution and global supply chains. This kind of thinking, seeing patterns where none exist, assigning agency to random market forces, believing in grand coordinated conspiracies, can intensify post-stroke as the brain's pattern recognition systems go haywire like a fuckwit trying to see Jesus in every piece of toast, the physics-defying core belief. Let's be absolutely clear. Water does not fucking destroy magnets. Pour water on a magnet. Go ahead. I'll wait. The magnet still works. Now, yes, if you submerge electronics in water, you might create short circuits. If you corrode metal over time, magnets can degrade. But the fundamental claim that water defeats magnetism as some kind of natural law is so fundamentally wrong, it would get you laughed out of a middle school science fair. That Donnie Dingleberry holds this belief with religious conviction, that he has carried it for months or years despite presumably having staff who could correct him, despite the fucking evidence all around him, speaks to a brain that has lost its error correction mechanisms. A healthy brain maintains skepticism toward its own conclusions, especially when those conclusions violate observable reality. A damaged brain? It doubles down. It ossifies around false beliefs. It becomes a closed system impervious to external correction. Immanuel Kant wrote, "Science is organized knowledge, wisdom is organized life." Trumpty mouth anus has neither science nor wisdom, just disorganized neurological chaos masquerading as policy. The national security nightmare. We're all pretending isn't happening. Here's where the rubber meets the fucking road, where personal tragedy becomes collective catastrophe. This dipshit commands the military. He makes decisions about weapon systems, about naval engineering, about billion-dollar procurement programs, and he makes them with a brain that apparently believes water defeats magnets. The decision-making catastrophe. He literally said he's going to sign an executive order mandating steam catapults and hydraulic elevators on future carriers, based on false premises, based on delusional thinking, based on a fundamental misunderstanding of physics and engineering. This isn't just wrong. This is catastrophically expensive wrong. The Ford-class carrier program exists because steam catapults have limitations. Emails allows for smoother acceleration, reduced stress on airframes, the ability to launch a wider variety of aircraft including drones, and better energy efficiency. But none of that fucking matters when the decision-maker's brain is scrambled like eggs left too long on a hot pan. He'll waste billions returning to inferior technology because his deteriorating neurons can't process the superiority of the replacement. As Isaiah Berlin observed, to understand is to perceive patterns. But Donnie Shitchompshoot perceives only the patterns his dying brain generates. False patterns, paranoid patterns, simplified patterns that bear no relationship to reality, the dominoes beyond the ships. This isn't just about aircraft carriers, though. If his brain is this compromised on naval engineering, what other decisions is he making with equally corrupted cognitive machinery? Nuclear response protocols, intelligence assessments, trade negotiations. Every single decision flows through that same malfunctioning meat computer, that same neural wetware that thinks water beats magnets. We're all passengers on a bus driven by someone who might be actively stroking out, and we're pretending everything is fine because acknowledging the reality is too goddamn terrifying. We'd rather ride this vehicle into the ditch than confront the fact that the driver's brain is melting like an asswipe's popsicle in July. The enabler ecosystem. And where the fuck are all the people around him? The advisors? The chiefs of staff? The military brass? They're standing there, watching this train wreck of cognition, and doing nothing. Either they're complicit, they're powerless, or they're themselves too fucked up to recognize the crisis. The whole system has become a collective delusion machine, a reality distortion field where obviously impaired cognition gets normalized and rationalized. Jürgen Habermas argued that the idea of the public sphere is that of a domain of our social life where such a thing as public opinion can be formed. But what happens when that public sphere witnesses obvious cognitive collapse and collectively agrees to pretend it isn't happening? When the social contract includes ignoring the emperor's neurological nakedness? This is what keeps me awake at night, sweating into my sheets like a scumbag who just watched a horror movie. Not just that the Donald of Dumpster's brain is clearly failing, but that we've built a system where brain failure at the highest levels gets repackaged as unconventional thinking or telling it like it is. Where obvious neurological impairment becomes political theater, where stroke symptoms become campaign fodder. The magnet and water speech wasn't just embarrassing political theater. It was a medical emergency broadcast live, a cry for help from a brain that can no longer maintain coherent thought, no longer process basic physical reality, no longer distinguish between delusion and fact. And our response? To debate whether his policies are good or bad, as though policy even matters when the policymaker's cognitive machinery has turned to shit-tier mush. Scott Cunningham wrote, "Magic is the projection of natural energies to produce needed effects. But there's no magic that can resurrect dead neurons, no spell that can reverse vascular damage, no ritual that can restore executive function once it's gone. We're watching entropy win, watching a brain dissolve in real time, and pretending it's politics as usual. The USS George Washington deserved better than being the stage for this medical catastrophe. The Navy deserves better. The country deserves better. Hell, even Donald Prolapsed Asshole himself deserves better than being paraded around while his brain rots. Even assholes deserve dignity in decline. But instead, we get this. A 79-year-old man with apparent stroke symptoms making national security decisions based on the belief that water defeats magnets, while we all collectively agree to pretend this is normal. This is fine. Everything is fine. Except it's not fucking fine. And somewhere deep in what's left of our collective sanity, we all fucking know it.